Welcome back to Studio Z, once again in remote form, this time from the offices of Incident.io in London. We're in sort of the Shoreditch area of London, right? This is sort of an amazing building. You're probably seeing some video right now of what this place looks like and the office setup they've got here. And we're very lucky to be joined by Alicia Collymore, who is an engineering manager
that's right.
Here at Incident.io that I met at Developer Week in Oakland, in California, earlier this year. It was February or January or something.
Yeah.
And Alicia gave a great talk that I thought would make her a superb fit for Studio Z, talking about engineering culture and pace in engineering teams with a big focus on that.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I gotta ask, because I'm Josh Twist, I get this thing about Oliver Twist all the time. And we have a few British viewers, I'm sure. If you hear the name Collymore, you think of Stan Collymore, right?
Yep, you do.
He's actually a relative, right?
Yeah, a distant relative. I think I met the man once at a funeral, and that was about it. So
fair enough.
Can't say I know the guy, but we do share a family name for sure.
I should know better than doing that to you, given the trouble I have with Oliver.
Is that an old relative of yours, Oliver?
No, well, it's a yeah. No, the Americans don't do it to me. It's only British people. But I have a good comeback for everybody. I'll tell you after the show. All right. Okay. So anyway, tell us a little bit about yourself, actually, and we'd love to hear your sort of journey.
Yeah.
You know, how you got into tech, what your resume looks like a little bit. Like, tell us the story of Alicia.
Cool. So I had the classic sort of intro into tech through becoming a WordPress developer. So came in like right through the door in web. My interest in tech just came from like the birth of the internet, like growing up and the internet sort of being introduced into my life and being like, how does this work? Like, where is this information coming from, right? So I was super interested in like the mechanics behind the web and sort of set myself about to find out and figure it out and figured out like web development and, played around a lot growing up with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, very, very web-based. And then tried to sort of find myself a job, but with no degree, which was very, very challenging and difficult. But I managed to wrangle my way in, and I started at a very small startup called Sole Trader Websites, where we built websites for sole traders, plumbers, electricians, and the likes of that type of stuff, and building out WordPress websites. So there I sort of figured out PHP, very, very using JavaScript a lot. HTML, CSS, and I was building out tons of websites. Like our time from like 0 to website development was like 2 to 3 hours.
Yep.
We were smashing them out. So I've built thousands of WordPress websites in my time.
Yep.
And then, I moved into a sort of bigger company. I didn't really feel like I had the experience. I knew there were some things we should be doing, but we weren't doing. I was the first engineer at that company. I was like, what's this like test-driven development stuff? Like what's Angular? Like what are all these things that come out the woodworks that we're not using? And I didn't really feel like I was ever going to get the experience being like one of the sort of most tenured engineers at the company. I'm like, who is going to introduce this stuff to me here?
Yep.
So I went to UView TV. So UView TV is BT TV. It's Talk TV.
Okay.
So it's the operating system, your TV guide. You're sort of flicking through channels and you can see the sort of panel coming up on what channel you're in and what TV show is on currently. So sort of building the UI behind that, where I just learned so much around sort of core fundamentals of software development, writing tests, developing on the cloud, dabbled around with Android a little bit with Android television and just really, really learned a lot about sort of what it means to be a software engineer rather than a web developer, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then, over time, I sort of moved around a little bit. I went to a small German fintech. We were doing micropayments for news articles and things like that. And there I progressed into a tech lead role.
Okay.
And sort of, managing, sort of being the sort of technical authority for the team. And
so with the tech lead, not managing the people, like they're not reports to you, but you're sort of responsible for technical direction.
Exactly.
So leadership in an IC capacity.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly, yeah. And I did that for about, don't check my LinkedIn, but maybe about a year before I was sort of, given the opportunity to manage some people.
Okay, cool.
I think the role that I was doing, I was leaning more into EM things than tech lead things. And at Later Pay, it was very much like the EM role was more people focused rather than the sort of hybrid that we're used to in the industry at the moment, I would say. So I was sort of leaning into a lot of process and this and that type of thing. How should we work together? How can we perform better as a team? So yeah, I got given the opportunity to sort of line manage somebody, and I really enjoyed it. It worked out really well. I liked the sort of coaching someone through something and seeing them get the win, and that was way more rewarding to me than shipping code. So I just wanted to do a lot more of that. So I was EM there for about 7 months before I decided I wanted to move on and go to a different company. The business changed direction and it went to a space that I didn't really feel like I wanted to be in. So yeah, I jumped ship and I went to a company called Lab Genius. And Lab Genius are a biotech company, and they use machine learning to basically enhance drug development, protein development. So using proteins to effectively try to battle cancer and see, you know, how they can sort of solve this huge problem that we have in the world. It was incredibly fascinating. I worked with the automation team. So the automation team, essentially, if you imagine a scientist with like a little pipette, like moving liquids around, the automation team would scale that. So the scientists would come up with an experiment that they wanted to run to sort of validate and get data, so we could sort of validate that this protein is a good protein, and we could put this, you know, like up here and say this is a great protein example, run that back through machine learning. But we needed to do that at scale, hundreds and hundreds of experiments. So we used robotics and liquid handling machines. So we used to have to program them and manage them and maintain them. And that's the team that I led there at Lab Genius.
Awesome.
Before I got made redundant, unfortunately, biotech, risky business. And then I came here to Incident.io, where I lead and manage our core sort of product offering, which is response, so responding to an incident. What do your team do? How do they sort of coordinate and manage amongst themselves when, you know, your services are down? So yeah, that's what I do here at the moment. I look after two of our response teams, so sort of mini group.
Yeah, awesome. And I love the sort of self-made nature of the story. You know, we have a mixture of folks at Zooplo, some with the degrees, some with not. I certainly see no difference in the capability. What I love about sort of people who've taken their own path is, you know, they've done it genuinely for the love of the technology and curiosity about it, and not just like, hey, I'm going to take this degree and do computer science because I think it pays well. It's like, you know, it's much more a labor of love, and people come through with a very different set of learned skills, I find, in that case. So it's super awesome. One of the things we wanted to spend time talking about was pace. Now, on Studio Z, we've talked quite a lot about engineering culture at places like Facebook and a little bit at Stripe. And Facebook very much values speed of execution. You know, famously move fast and break things. Like actually highlighting the idea of going fast and then the trade-offs that might come with that. And so you gave this talk about driving pace in teams, and I really want to spend some time on that today. So I guess, you know, if you were to give like the TLDR of your talk, where would you start?
That's a good question. Where would I start? I would say the TLDR is to put pace at the center of your culture in engineering.
Okay. Put pace at the heart of your team. Yeah.
Put pace at the heart of your team. Yeah.
And what are you, I mean, I think you mentioned some of the things you do there, like write it down. Like, what does that mean?
Well, I think it's easy to be like, pace, go quickly, but like how? And also like why?
Yeah.
Right? So I think we're smart people. We hire engineers who are very smart and capable. Help them out, right?
Yeah.
Write it down. Like why do we want to move quickly?
Yeah.
Well, we want to move quickly because we're a startup. We're still sort of proving out our space here. It's also like quite a new space, incident management, right?
Yeah.
So like, what does that mean? And why does moving quickly matter? Well, actually, because like the quicker we can ship something for a customer, the quicker we can prove out the value to our customer.
Yeah.
Right? So we want to be able to move quickly. That's the why. Well, okay, well, how do we do that?
Yeah.
Because we don't want to write poor code, and we don't want to like have like bad security or anything like that. So like, how do we do it?
Yeah.
Well, we can do it with process.
Yeah.
We can do it with a smart developer setup.
Yeah.
Right? There's like different ways that we can move quickly and enable that. And then like tips and tricks, like what does a quick project feel like? You know, what do our engineers do that help them move quickly? Do they have a certain setup on their keyboard? Like it can be the smallest things.
Yeah.
Some of my engineers, they move really quickly because they genuinely can type really fast.
Oh wow.
And some of my engineers move quickly because they spend half a day planning it all out beforehand.
Yeah.
So it's all about understanding like what pace means. It's not about yeeting code out.
Yeah.
It's about like understanding how you can move quickly as an individual and then applying that to a team.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And it's a topic that's come up on the channel quite a bit. You know, Vijay Raji, one of our guests, the CEO of StatSig and one of the former VPs at Facebook, was famous for going fast. And he would talk a lot about valuing execution over strategy, because execution, you know, the faster you move, the more you get to try things. You know, you're just operating on a different timescale to those around you. It helps you beat your competition.
Exactly.
As you said, prove out ideas. And the cost of a bad idea or a bad execution is much less, because time's like the one thing we can't get back, right? You know, it's the one thing that we run out of. So it makes sense, and I love the idea of you centralizing it inside the culture. I think that very much resonates with me. There isn't like one flowchart you give to a set of people. You know, you talked about some people typing fast and some people planning. Other people don't like planning so much, and that's not how they're going to execute so quickly. But just making it clear that it's something the company cares about, like top down. But one thing you mentioned that I've not talked about much is interviewing for pace.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you approach that? How do you find folks who are speedy?
Yeah, it's like not easy. And it's also kind of a gut feeling. But some of the sort of signals that I look for when I'm interviewing is a sense of frustration with slowness.
Okay.
So one of the questions that we ask in our interview process is like, talk me through your favorite project or your most rewarding project.
Yeah.
And they talk you through it. This is what we did. This is what I built. This was my role in it. And I say to them, how long did it take you, right? And it's really interesting because sometimes they're like, 6 months. We did it really quickly. And you're like, okay. My engineers could do that in half that time, right? Is what I'm thinking. I don't say it to them. It's what I'm thinking in my head. Or they'd be like, oh, you know, it was 3 weeks. And I'm like, do you think that was quick? I'd be like, yeah, I thought that was quick. Could you have done it quicker?
Yeah.
Is another question I like to follow up with, whether it was a 6-month project or a 3-week project, because like, are they able to switch in their brain and be like, well, actually, if we did this, this, and this instead of this, yes, I could have done it in half the time. And that's the type of thinking that I'm looking for with engineers, because when I'm sitting in a meeting with them and they're presenting a scope and they say it's going to take 2 weeks, and I say to them, well, what could we do to make it a week? I want them to be able to quickly go, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
So asking that question in the interview and see how they respond to it, having a sense of what they think is quick and what they think is slow, and trying to get that sense of frustration out of them, like kind of like have to dig a little bit in the interview and push a little bit, like, oh, that took 6 months, like that feels like quite a long time. What do you think? Oh no, I don't feel like it was long. Or what you're looking for is, yeah, it was long and we did this, and I don't know why we did it that way. And like, people are trying to be their best selves in an interview. So it's hard to like get the sense of frustration, like, and good people, they don't want to like shit on their old company, which is also like a good signal. But you can kind of see when someone wants to say something, but they don't.
Right.
And that's what I'm looking for. This kind of sense of like reserved frustration.
Pent up intolerance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really interesting strategy. The other thing you talked about was autonomy of engineers being important. So why, you know, what does that mean to you, and why does it help with pace?
Yeah, so for me, it means that I want engineers to be able to do whatever they need to get the job done without having to stop every day. Yeah. Can I do this? Stop. Can I do this? To come and ask me, who is in back-to-back meetings all day. Yeah. When are you even going to get the time to come and grab me? Yeah. Or like, you're going to wait 3 hours for me to respond to your Slack message. Like, just do the thing, right? So like, it's about hiring engineers that are like capable of doing that, capable of thinking in the right way. So we hire product engineers. We don't hire software engineers. And the reason why that product element is so important is because we want our engineers to have product thinking so they can make decisions in projects without having to go and grab a product manager, go and grab an engineering manager to say, this thing, 9 times out of 10, they're going to get it right because we've specifically hired for that product thinking.
Interesting. Okay, that's something I want to pull on this idea of a product engineer. I knew something had come up that I hadn't made notes about. So autonomy, you know, there's a word we use a lot when we're hiring, actually, where we talk about our expectation of people is that you're going to be really resourceful and get yourself unblocked, which I think goes hand in hand with like a requirement for people to be autonomous. And so when you say that, are you talking about decision making, like how to solve a problem in the product? Is it okay to use this stack or this thing or this library? Like, you want people to have like freedom in those kind of decisions?
Kind of like both, right?
Okay.
So I think they're kind of different. Like there's a technical decision and then there's a product decision. So should we use a modal or a draw?
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, like I have high confidence that my engineers can just like make the right decision there.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And so, let's talk about this product engineer thing. So this is, how many people at Incident now? Do you say it's like 80 people
80
total?
in total, yeah, and about 40 in engineering and about 25 engineers.
Okay.
So that's it. When we say, 40 in product development, which includes data, product managers, engineering managers, designers, and engineers.
So, but you do have product managers?
We do.
So you have product managers and product engineers.
Yep.
Now, I guess in some traditional organizations, the product manager would probably be the person making the calls, maybe with a designer, about whether it's a draw or a modal. And engineers just, yeet code out, as you said.
Yeah.
How's it different here then?
I guess it's like more collaborative. So our product managers will be talking to the customers, gaining insight, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and they would then write what we call a cover sheet.
Yeah.
This is the problem, this is what we think the solution is, yada, yada, yada. Our engineers will actually write out the detailed product spec.
Got it.
And the technical scope that goes with that.
Okay.
We would all sit down in a meeting, which we call a kickoff meeting, so kicking off a project, and we would go over that together, engineering managers, product managers, designers, and whoever is working on that project within the team.
Yeah.
And we would go through that and be like, oh, what about that? What about this? What about that?
Yeah.
But the brunt of the work has been done by the product engineer. We might change a couple of things after discussing as a team. But for the most part, they've written out that product spec and we move forward with that.
So in essence, you are, it sounds like the trade-off you might be making there is, we'll let the engineer just go ahead, make good decisions. We think they've got good judgment. We hire for that. We may have to make some corrections later that we decide because we didn't have this very formal process. But overall, that's much quicker and better to fix some little, I don't want to say mistakes, but little things you change.
UI nits is what we would call them, right? When at the end of a project, so we have that sort of sense check at the kickoff. Does this feel right? Yes. Sometimes we need a designer for that thing. Designer, can you design this thing? Sometimes we're like, we can do this, it's no problem. Engineers will work on the thing, and at the end we have something called a polish party, where we all sit in a room and we go through the flow. It's kind of like a team QA, collaborative QA, where we'll be like, oh, don't like that copy, oh, the padding's off on that, oh, this doesn't feel right. And then we sort of clean everything up and then get it shipped.
Interesting. It very much reminds me of Stripe, famously. Actually, early on said they would never hire product managers because they hired engineers who had this very strong sense of product. They later regretted that when they needed to hire product managers, and people were like, I don't want to work there because this Patrick guy said. I was a product manager at Stripe, so they did hire them for sure. That really resonates with me and how I think we do things at Zoopla, but I've never heard it said so explicitly before. So I like that. I think we talk a lot about, we've done this several times on the show, about looking at risk and not overreacting to it by building too much process around it, letting people run. And if the risk is someone might die or some important customer data might leak, then the guards go up and everything's much stricter.
Absolutely.
But if it is that we might need to redo the UI a little bit, or no, let's make those kind of mistakes. That's great, and people will learn from them.
Not the end of the world, right? If a button's a little bit janky.
Right. Do you actually call people product engineers, or is that just
that's their title.
That it is,
and that's what we hire for. That's in our job descriptions when we're hiring. It is their titles on LinkedIn. Every engineer here is a product engineer, unless you're a data engineer.
Where did that come from? Did they invent it at Incident, or did the founders have it from somewhere else or something?
Yeah.
I've not seen this before.
No, it's definitely a thing. I promise it's a thing. But I think Intercom have product engineers as well.
That would make sense. A very product-oriented company, right? Yeah.
There's definitely a few companies out there doing it. Maybe Linear. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that one. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, I'll look into it. But that's fascinating. I didn't know that. Okay, good finding. Okay, good learning there. One of the other things you talked about was transparency being important. So tell me about transparency and how you think about that.
Well, I think when there is so much autonomy and we are expecting engineers to be making these decisions on the fly, whether it's a technical decision or a product decision, transparency takes a big part in this, because yes, I might be in meetings all day, but I don't want to come back to my desk at the end of the day and everything's changed. Or forget about coming back to my desk at the end of the day. I see the product once it's shipped and I'm like, why did we do this? What happened to our plan? We've changed. So it's really important that when the decision is made, plop it in Slack. Hey, we've changed this, this, and this. and like shout if you disagree. So maybe I'll come in and be like, oh, hey guys, I'm not sure about this. Can we sit down and talk about it? Or maybe it's just like thumbs up, a little acknowledge, like, yeah, thanks for letting me know. Because at least I know, because, you know, like Pete, our CTO, he's going to come to me and be like, Alicia, why have you done it like that? Or, you know, he's going to come to me and my product manager and be like, what happened here? And I need to be able to be like, oh, well, the team made this decision because this, and this, and I think they're correct. Rather than, I don't know. You know, so it's really important that we have transparency when we're making decisions. Why have we done it like this? And when you've got sort of different levels of tenure and experience in your team with your engineers, like it's also about example setting and like showing the way a little bit. Like have my more senior engineers being like, I've made this change and this is why. So my more junior engineers can be like, that makes sense to me. I've learned something just from this Slack message. So it's all about like knowledge sharing, keeping everybody up to date, stakeholder management. Like I think you get so much out of transparency. I don't really know why you wouldn't be transparent.
How do you avoid so it sounds great, obviously, but how do you avoid like there just being so much noise? How do you like ensure you get like signal out of the noise? Like I just fear this idea that I'm getting so many notifications of like, I made this decision, I made that decision. Where's the line? You know,
I mean, like
I took a 5-minute break and had a Mars bar. You know, you don't know about that, right? So where's the line?
I think it's about like knowing what is important and what is not. And we talk about this a lot. Like it came up in a retro a few weeks ago, quite honestly. Like I don't know where to look. Feels like Slack's too noisy. And we sat down as a team and we discussed it. Well, like let's reorganize our Slacks. And we all reorganized our Slacks. So we had like must respond. Maybe we look at don't respond at all. And this was just within my team. This wasn't like an org-wide thing, but it's just like this does come up and it is a problem. And like we just try to solve it in small ways when it comes up. So team channels are important. For every team, there are about 2 to 3 projects running at any time, but each project has a project channel. Not everybody from the team needs to be in every project channel, right? So, you know, it's nice to be, sure, but if you don't read it, if you mark all as read one day, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
You know, you get the update and stand up the next day. So it's kind of about being conscious about what is important and what is not important. As a manager, I kind of have to like read and understand everything, but that's different, that's my role, but it's not expected of the engineers.
Interesting. So transparency helps you go fast more as a unit. It probably slows down the individual a little bit because he's got some communication overhead, some reading. But as
a unit, yeah, because we don't have to course correct at the end,
right?
Because we've seen the decision made up front, so we can course correct at this stage rather than something going out and being like, whoa, that's way off.
Yes, yeah.
And then having to sit down for an hour and discuss what happened. Oh, we did this because of this and this. Like we don't have to do any of that because like someone spent 10 minutes writing a Slack message.
Yeah, that's a super common thing. This idea of shortening the feedback loop being the best way to be sort of agile, right?
Yeah.
On terms of shortening things, I think another thing you talked about was short projects. Like, what does that mean?
It means short projects. So we try to keep our projects to be like a week.
Oh wow,
or
that
2
is short.
weeks.
Okay.
It's very short. Like our biggest projects are a month or 2 months, and that's like huge to us. And like this is taking a long time. The reason we like to keep things short is because, again, it's kind of like what you said, short feedback loop.
Yeah.
If we can like build the smallest piece of value and ship it out to our customers in a week, why wouldn't we? And like proving that model up front really quickly rather than spending 3 months building something, getting it out and like no one cares.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the shorter we can keep things, like the more agile we can move, the more flexible we can be, the more things we can build. Yeah. And we can iterate and build as we go along.
Yeah. Time is risk as well, right? The longer a project's running, the more likely it is going to go sideways.
Yeah.
But I guess the devil's advocate to this might say that I could even sort of argue Zoopla was a case of this in the early days, you know, where we thought we could ship a product with just one feature, like rate limiting or something in terms of an API gateway. But then customers didn't see value in that on its own. Like no one's going to go to the trouble of setting up a gateway that only does rate limiting, knowing that they're going to need auth and all the other stuff. Yeah. So that didn't really work for us. And honestly, I think if we'd have been a YC company, we'd have quit because we wouldn't have shown value enough. It took us a little while to get to table stakes, and then things took off. Like how would you say that? How would you make that work? How do you make there must be a feature in Incident where you can't get much of it done in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so what do you do then?
Like we take a little bit longer, and we have design partners. So I'll take you a few steps backwards to sort of your first question, which is like, how do you know like it's the right thing to build? And that is because we talk to our customers.
Yep.
And we care a lot about talking to our customers. We have Slack channels with all of our customers. We also have a separate Slack community for some of our smaller customers as well, but we are constantly getting feedback and we encourage the feedback.
Yeah.
Also, engineers are the ones that are using our product, right?
Yeah.
So we are talking to them constantly and getting that feedback. What do you want? What do you need? And our product managers do a lot of this, and our customer success team do a lot of this, of understanding our customers' need and logging it. And you know what we do is we sit down as a team and we go through that and be like, all right, what are we building this month? So we already know, like, oh look, 10 of our customers have asked for this thing, like, well, 10 of our enterprise customers have asked for this thing, and like 5 of our pro customers, like, this feels like a good thing for us to build. Let's build this thing.
Yeah.
So we kind of have like a good sense of the thing that we're building is valuable already. Yeah. And then in terms of like bigger things, like, yeah, sure, some things take longer. We built out a catalog. Like, that is not a small thing to build a sort of catalog to connect all the different parts of your organization. That took us 2 to 3 months to build. Yeah. And we had design partners for that. So who's asked for a catalog? Have we sat down with them? Why do you want a catalog? What do you want out of it? How do you want to integrate that with incident management? Like, what type of behavior are you expecting? And then we take that away, we work on something, we show it back to them, iterate until we have the thing that we're happy with.
Okay. So with short projects, I think it's still a good cultural thing to think about, even if sometimes you have to have a larger project to do these larger milestones. But, you're just intrinsically going to avoid the 6-monther or the 1-yearer, which is, I can't ever imagine Zooplo taking on a 1 year. I hope we never do. So even though I'm playing devil's advocate with you, I'm very much aligned, which brings me to another sort of risk strategy that you talked about, which I really like, actually, and I have a video on my own plan on this topic, but you called it, I think it was called Do the Hard Bits First in your talk. So yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, I think as engineers, we're dealing with a lot of complexity. And I think the more complex things are, the more sort of hidden bogeys there are in there. Right. And when you're building something and they pop out, those are what's going to cause your project's delays. Those are going to cause issues or incidents, right? So if you can get them out of the way in your project first, and if something does go wrong, it's easier to extend and be like, oh, it's going to take us a few more, on day 3, it's going to take us a few more days than originally planned because of the XYZ, is much better than that happening on like the day that you're expected to ship the thing and be like, oh, we've just blown up everything because of a migration we've run, right? Do that migration as early as you can. Have them running in tandem, the old mode and the new mode. And then when we're ready, we can be like, oh, we're confident. This has been running for 5 days now. We can ship this. Yeah. So it's just about like removing complexity as early as you can. Yeah,
no, I love this because I honestly think so many engineers do it the other way around.
Yeah.
I think about someone starting a project and they've got this vision for this thing they're going to build. Let's imagine they're building that. And they'll start by getting the website template right, and then they'll set up auth, which is like stuff they've done 100 times before. They do all this time, and then don't think about what I think of as like the mud in the project. Like there'll be something where they're like, I don't quite know how that's going to work yet. Do that first. Totally aligned with that. Let's talk about value. You talked about value a lot in your talk, and then I think one of the slides was like laser focus or something on value. Like, what does value mean? Why do you think it's so important to focus on it? Tell us more about that section.
I guess like we're very product driven, right? So for us, like we want to be building value to our customers. So being laser focused on like getting this thing into customers' hands just inherently sort of puts into your mindset of like, let me get this thing out quickly and deliver this value to the customer. Yeah. And we're also more focused on value. So we're more focused on the thing working well and right than it being like super, super shiny. And that's not to say like our stuff looks terrible. It looks quite nice to be honest, but like it's all about the value and getting that piece of thing out. And if, padding is off or text is slightly like out of alignment or any sort of weird UI nit that you could like spend hours, some weird CSS thing, right? With Z-index, spending hours on, just like, just ship it and we'll fix that later. Okay. If it's really a bother. Yeah. So yeah, it's just about like the value piece to the customer and does it work and is it doing the thing they expect it to do?
And that's, so the trade-off, you want things to look nice obviously, because you certainly seem to take pride in appearance. You hear it incident, like the logo is great, the office looks amazing. Product looks good, but you're saying that the trade-off is that like, you know, that is a P2 compared to like the thing doing what it needs to do and helping the customer.
It's a really nice way to put it. It's a P2, right? It's like, let's get the thing in the customer's hands and get them getting value out of it and using it. And, you know, any sort of bugs, any small bugs that come up, you know, we'll sort out later. We're not going to focus on all of the possible edge cases of a feature. We're not going to do that. We're going to do happy paths, a couple of paths that we think might come up. And then all of those weird edge cases, we'll deal with it when it comes.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things you talked about, when you talked about timelines, I think the slide was beat deadlines. I mean, who doesn't want to beat deadlines? Like, you know, how do you make that work?
Like, I think, so this is more for like an engineer rather than like a team thinking about it or an organization thinking about it. It's more of like an individual thinking about getting something done. So you have a certain time period to do something. Let's say, for argument's sake, we've got a week to do this thing. And you've managed to do it in 3 days. Now, a lot of engineers will start to think about all of those edge cases that I've spoken about. Oh, what about that thing? And let me add some more tests here to just make this a little bit more robust. And let me think about this edge case over here and how we might handle that. And you'll fill that time. And you'll get to day 5, and you're like, here's this really well thought out feature, it's fantastic. And you're like, yeah, it is fantastic, but I didn't need all of that extra stuff. Whereas if you stop at that day 3 and you go back to your team and say, hey guys, I've finished my thing now. Do you need me somewhere else, or can I do the X, Y, and Z to make this thing a little bit nicer? And that's what I mean by beating the deadline. Like, don't fill the time because you finished early, right? Stop, go back to your team and be like, hey, where do you need me? And this is the value thing as well. Like, is doing all that stuff really adding value to your customer? Probably not. Like, maybe one person who manages to hit that weird edge case, but we think about the masses.
Interesting. Yeah, I like the framing of putting it something that's in the mindset of the individual actually being, because there's another, like, don't gold plate is like another similar meme, right? In software engineering where you kind of don't need something to be exactly. Like the lily being gilded. I really like the idea of it being something you think of at the individual level. It sounds like something you want to do as like an organizational level, which I'm sure is great, but probably the way you get there, right, is by having the individuals.
That's the sort of approach that
beat deadlines.
We like to take, for sure. It's an individual mindset at that point, and you can grow that through transparency, through that engineer messaging in the group channel and another engineer seeing that and being like, oh, maybe I should do that next time, right? And that's how you build it out to be a more team mindset and organization mindset. But as a manager, you should be drilling that into individuals.
Okay, awesome. Wow, I love that. Okay, so we've talked a lot about going fast. I think there's like actually a lot of great nuggets in here. What are some of the downsides and trade-offs? You know, we talked about move fast and break things. I think Zuck was like explicitly saying what the trade-off might be there. How do you think about the downsides and trade-offs of going fast and some of these things you've talked about here? So I think one of our biggest ones that, you know, we bump into, especially when we're onboarding engineers, is haste versus pace. So you could be wanting to move really quickly and just making a bunch of basic mistakes. Just pure hygiene, right? Just yeeting code out without really thinking about it, right? And it just makes for a poor experience for the user. Your code's janky and buggy, and like, that's not what we want. Like, and have you thought about any of the security concerns? So we have private incidents as one of our features. So, you know, organizations who, within that organization, maybe they have like a security team who would have private incidents. Whenever we're working on private incidents, we will take twice as long on that thing because we want to be really careful. Now, we're already dealing with customers' worst moments, and now there's a little bucket of even more sensitive moments. It's like, let's be super, super careful with that kind of stuff, right? And, you know, I think it's really easy to like rush through a lot of things, or when we're doing authentication or skim, right? User permissions, all of this kind of stuff. It's like, let's not just yeet this out. Let's like take some time to think about it. So I think like, for us, I think it's really easy to sort of fall into rushing and making mistakes and causing a bad experience for our customers because, you know, you've got some janky piece of code that hardly works. So code quality and security and doing things the right way, but in a smart way, is what's important to us. Is there anything that like happens negatively sort of at a human level in the team, like around mental health, if there's a lot of pressure to go fast? Like and again, this is another thing that happens when we're sort of onboarding people. You'll notice people working late, and I'm like,
Are you here because you want to be here or because you feel like you have to be here?
Okay.
And again, that's a manager mindset. That's a manager sort of intuition that you need to have and need to be able to have. Like, if I've got an engineer every night, I'm leaving and you're still here, what are you doing here? And I will challenge you on that and be like, what's going on? Like, do you feel like you're not going to get your project done? And if they're like, yeah, I feel like, and then I'm like, go home, please. Like, I will gladly let that project go over a day or two because it's false. It's a sort of sense of false pace.
Right.
You think things are moving quickly, but actually your engineers are working 2 hours extra a day. That's not moving quickly. That's not the moving quickly we want. Right. I think in some startups, in some companies, they kind of do want that. Like, and they agree that with the people that they hire, and that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Like, you start here at 9 and you finish here at 6 or 5 or whatever time it is you finish, you go home.
Yeah.
If you're staying here, it's because you want to or because you have time to do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I might challenge an engineer who's working and be like, why are you here? And be like, oh, I've got dinner with a friend, so I thought I'd just work for an extra hour. Fine.
Got it.
No problem with that at all. But if you're here because you feel like you have to be, then we should talk about it.
Interesting. And so obviously worth noting at this point that Incident is like an on-site company.
It
You're
is,
not a remote
we're in office,
company. So you get to see this.
We
it's
do
like
see it,
where Zoopla being a fully remote company, I guess we're not always fully aware like exactly how many hours people are working. We try and be very flexible with people's time, but it's interesting. How do you feel, just quickly, on the remote versus on-site?
Hot topic, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
I've worked in both environments as a manager as well. I've worked in a fully remote, fully distributed company as a manager, and I've worked in this environment in office. Lab Genius was in office as well because it was in lab technically. I much prefer working in office, and the reason is because you get much more of a sense of a read of the room. And how people are feeling, and then they're coming in every day. Are they high? Are they low? It's hard to get that from a screen, and you can. Like, you definitely can. I've done it before, but it's harder. And when everyone is in a room and like chat is happening, it's buzzing, and engineers are turning around and being like, hey, just quickly, can I grab you for this thing? It's much more collaborative. You're able to move much more quickly because you're not waiting for someone to reply to you on a Slack message. You've literally just tapped them on the shoulder and been like, hey, can you help me debug this thing quickly? Spend 10 minutes doing that, and then you both crack on with your jobs rather than Slack message, wait an hour. You're stuck. You're sitting there stuck in your home just like, what do I do? I think if working in office really fosters collaboration in a way that I think is challenging remotely. Yeah, interesting. I guess one of the trade-offs there that might be like flexibility of hiring and where you can big
get
one.
people
There's
from
some people who sort of come to the interview process and be like, oh, well, I want to work remotely, and I'm like, you're just not going to succeed here. And it's not about like, you know, we're anti-remote. Like, I'm sure like one day maybe we'll get there, who knows? But where we are in like the stage of the company and the growth that we sort of want to have, it's much better for us to be in person. And like someone being remote on a screen and not being able to have that sort of ad hoc conversation that the team have, because the team sit together back to back, so they can turn around and be like, hey, what about this thing? And they have little mini meetings throughout the day. I'll be walking past and they're in a little huddle chatting about something. And even I don't know what's going on, but the engineers are having that discussion. And for someone to not be in that moment, I think it'll be challenging for them. Yeah,
got it. Okay, awesome. It makes sense. What do you think? So last thing I want to talk about was, and coming back to the prior topic of like downsides and trade-offs of pace, is the boundaries. So there's probably some things which are non-negotiables where, you know, you never sort of trade them out for speed. Like, what are some examples of stuff there?
I think I kind of touched on them a little bit, but like security is a huge one. You know, we've got large enterprise customers and we are dealing with their incidents. We are dealing with the moments they go down where their customers are hounding them, and, you know, like, who knows what thing that they've broken, right? Like, and we need to be able to hold that data and information sacredly. So we care a lot about that. We care a lot about security, about authentication, logging in, about our data, where it's being stored, how it's being stored, who can access it, when can they access it, and all that type of thing. Yeah,
it makes sense. I think a really important thing to, when you sort of set a pace culture in an organization. Okay, so the famous last question I ask everybody at Studio Z is, who should I interview next and why?
Cool. I did think about this. I would think you'd have a great chat with Tom Ashworth.
Ashworth, okay.
Tom Ashworth is ex-Twitter,
okay,
ex-Bulb. Bulb are an energy company in the UK, who are quite large. He was my head of engineering at Lab Genius.
Okay.
And he is now at NatCap, which is a sort of another science-backed company.
Yeah.
Really interesting guy, cares a lot about energy and the environment, has
Yeah.
led teams in different types of environments, from labs to sort of what he's doing now, working with scientists on sort of the economics of nature.
Yeah.
And I think it would be really interesting to speak to him about the sort of differences in, you know, tech and biotech, and how that sort of relates to engineering in general.
And engineering culture. Sounds awesome.
Exactly.
Tom, I'm going to be reaching out and trying to line you up for the next time I'm in London to do a remote Studio Z with me. Alicia, thanks so much for doing the show. It's been really great chatting. I think there's like a lot of good nuggets in there for folks about running teams faster, and like, what was the phrase where I think the title of this video is going to be put pace at the heart of your team.
Yep, put pace at the heart of your team.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks.
Cheers.